The dead don't always stay buried in New Orleans. Sometimes they leave gifts on your doorstep, and sometimes those gifts light themselves. Welcome to Tongue of the Serpent, a Southern Gothic horror podcast where memory keeps its own ledger, and every bargain comes due. Tonight's story is The Lantern and the Veil, where Renard Blackwood finds an old cemetery lantern burning outside the Krewe of the Morningstar. He knows better than to touch it, but curiosity has always been his favorite sin. Before dawn, he'll walk the corridors of the dead, owe a favor to a ghost, and learn that some debts don't take money. They take memory. The Lantern and the Veil. The gift on the doorstep. The rain had finally given up on New Orleans, leaving the streets slick and shining, like the city had been polished for inspection and then forgotten in the damp. The French Quarter exhaled a slow, humid sigh, and a mist rolled up from the river, curling around the lampposts like smoke from some great unseen incense burner. Somewhere, a saxophone bled a lonely note from a half-lit bar, and somewhere else, a cat declared war on a passing rat. The city, at night, is always awake, but sometimes it pretends to sleep, just to see who notices. Renard Blackwood noticed. He always noticed. He locked the front door of the Krewe of the Morningstar and muttered to himself,
"Smells like damp history and bad choices in here."
Because it did. It always did. A mixture of old wood, mildew, and the faint scent of candle wax that clung to haunted objects like guilt. He jiggled the lock twice, because experience had taught him locks were more a suggestion than a rule in this neighborhood, and pulled the door open to the warm night. That's when he saw it. A lantern set squarely on the stoop. Old wrought iron, the kind they carried in cemeteries when electricity was still a rumor. The glass was cracked like a spiderweb, but the flame inside burned steadily, throwing a long, trembling shadow across the wet street. A black veil was tied to the handle, fluttering in a wind that didn't exist, and the faint smell of jasmine curled up into the night air, mixing with wet stone and river musk. Renard Blackwood froze, because he knew what that smell meant. He didn't want to know it, didn't want to remember the half-heard stories Lucian had told him over whiskey and bad jazz. But memory has a way of being inconvenient. Jasmine meant the cemeteries were listening. Jasmine meant you were being noticed. He glanced up and down the street. No footsteps, no cars, no late-night drunk tourists stumbling from bourbon, just the city holding its breath. The veil shifted again, brushing the ground like the hand of a very patient, very dead woman. And from nowhere, not quite the street, not quite his head, he heard a whisper. He shouldn't have gone alone. Renard swore softly under his breath. He considered leaving it there, locking the door behind him and walking away to find a bar that didn't ask questions. But the Krewe of the Morningstar had a way of dragging him back into things he wanted no part of. The flame inside the lantern pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Renard sighed, crouched, and picked it up. The veil trailed over his head, soft and cool, like something testing the weight of him.
"Fine,"
he said to the night.
"But I already regret this."
He carried the lantern inside. Behind him, the street returned to breathing, and the mist swallowed his footprints. The disappearing Gravedigger. Renard woke to the soft thud of a ledger hitting the counter, and the unimpressed face of Lucien Devereaux staring down at him.
Sleeping in the shop again.
Lucien's voice was quiet, but it carried the particular brand of judgment only a man who has survived 3 separate hauntings before breakfast can manage. Renard blinked, rubbing his eyes, and glanced around. Morning light sifted through the warped front windows of the crew of the Morningstar, catching dust motes like tiny suspended ghosts. The lantern sat on the counter beside him. Its glass was dark now, the flame gone, but when he touched it, the metal was still warm.
Thought I locked the door.
Renard muttered.
You did.
Lucien said. He picked up the lantern gingerly, eyes narrowing at the veil draped over the handle.
And yet, this came inside with you?
Renard shrugged, which he had long ago perfected into an art form of feigned nonchalance.
Someone left it on the stoop. I brought it in. Figured I'd examine it.
Lucien laid the lantern down, careful, like it might bite. He plucked at the veil with a gloved hand.
This is widow business, and the crew policy is very clear about widow business.
He gave a meaningful pause.
Don't answer the call unless you're ready to pay the toll.
Renard considered that. He had heard Lucien say it before. The unofficial rule scrawled in the margins of the shop's old ledgers, whispered in half-remembered stories. He considered it carefully for exactly 3 seconds before asking.
What if I just look?
Lucien sighed and handed him a folded piece of paper that had been tucked into the veil. The writing inside was looping, elegant, and black as cemetery soil. Marcus Badu has gone missing. He came when I called. He should not have come alone. Renard frowned.
Marcus. The Gravedigger?
Lucien nodded, his expression grim.
He knows the rules. If the widow has him, he's either very lucky or very dead.
Renard turned the paper over, as if expecting a helpful map or instructions, and found only the faint perfume of jasmine clinging to the fibers. It reminded him of the cemetery at night, of damp stone and the sound of someone just out of sight whispering his name. He knew he should leave it. He knew Lucien was right, but he also knew 2 things about himself. He had a talent for trouble, and trouble had a talent for finding him first. By the time the church bells started chiming, the late morning hour, Renard was already out the door, the lantern in one hand, and the veil coiled like a living shadow in the other. The streets of the French Quarter felt different in the daylight, though not safer. The air was thick enough to chew, and the sky hung low, heavy and gray, like damp velvet, threatening rain that would never come. Tourists were sparse, leaving the city to its usual residents, the cats, the pigeons, and whatever walked unseen just past the corner of your eye. Renard's boots clicked against the old brick streets as he wound his way towards St. Louis Cemetery, No. 1. He didn't bother with a map. He didn't need one. The city was guiding him. Street signs were suddenly unfamiliar. Names he had walked past 100 times now replaced with things like Rue des Lames and Asphodel Lane. He tried to take a shortcut he'd used all his life, and the alley stretched twice as long as it should, shadows pooling like water around his feet. At one point, a streetcar bell rang in the distance, but when he turned, the rails were empty. Renard exhaled through his teeth.
Yeah, subtle.
The lantern flickered even without a flame, a faint heartbeat in his palm. The veil brushed his wrist, as if eager. In the distance, past the sagging roofs and black wrought iron balconies, he saw the sharp white walls of St. Louis Cemetery, number 1. The gates waited open, like a mouth expecting a visitor who had already been swallowed. Renard adjusted his grip on the lantern and stepped forward, muttering,
"All right, widow. I'm here. Let's see what you want this time."
The labyrinth of the dead. Renard had been in crypts before, real ones, the kind that hold nothing but mold, old bones, and the faint promise of tetanus. This was not one of those crypts. The moment he stepped through the arched doorway, the air thickened. His ears popped, like he'd crossed some invisible threshold into a place that was not entirely the world he knew. His lantern, still without fuel, flared with pale light, and the veil brushed against his knuckles as if urging him forward. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, tombs lining the walls like crooked teeth. Some were pristine white marble, others were crumbling, their names worn away. Renard had the impression that if he looked away and looked back, they'd be different. He took a tentative step, and the sound echoed far too long for such a narrow hall. Then the whispering started. It wasn't loud, not at first, just a soft hiss, like water trickling under stone. Then the words began to form, indistinct, then clear. "Renard." He froze. "Renard Blackwood. Thief. Liar." The voices came from the tombs themselves, little mouths of marble and crack and shadow. He swallowed hard and kept walking, muttering,
"Yup. Definitely hate this."
The deeper he went, the stranger it became. He passed a row of tombs with bas relief carved into stone. Not saints or angels, but moments from his own life. He saw himself as a boy, pockets stuffed with stolen pralines, running down a sunlit alley. He saw himself older, leaning against a doorway, watching a man he'd double-crossed bleed into the mud.
"Cute,"
he said to the crypt.
"Really digging into the greatest hits."
The next tomb showed him older still, standing in the rain, holding a letter he'd never sent. He looked away quickly. Something cold dripped on his neck. He reached up instinctively and felt condensation, slick as river water. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint smell of algae and mud, like the Mississippi had crept in for a secret visit. Ahead, the lantern's glow picked out a glint of metal. Another lantern, Marcus's, abandoned in the middle of the hall, its handle beaded with moisture. Renard crouched and picked it up. The metal was icy to the touch.
"Marcus?"
He called. His voice came back to him, warped, like he had traveled down a long pipe. He kept moving, but the crypt seemed to shift around him. He passed 3 doors in quick succession, each with a rusted iron handle. He opened one, another hallway, nearly identical to the one he stood in. He closed it, muttering,
"Nope."
Opened the next. Same hallway, same dripping water. He sighed.
"Cool. Ghost Escher house. Love this for me."
Then the air changed, and the widow's voice slipped through the walls like smoke. "You carry a light that does not belong to you, Renard Blackwood. Lights like that always cost something. Tell me, what will you give?" Renard stopped walking.
"Can't we just call this a free trial?"
No. He hesitated. He could feel the crypt waiting. The air was heavy with expectations, like the moment before a coin toss that could decide your life.
Fine,
He said.
take a memory. Something small. I've got plenty I don't need.
Not that kind, she whispered. I want something tender, something you will miss. Renard clenched his jaw. There weren't many of those left. Finally, he said,
Take my mother's voice. I barely remember it anyway.
The air shifted. Something cold brushed the inside of his head, and a sound went missing, like a bird flying out a window. He realized with a twist in his gut that he couldn't remember the timbre of her lullabies, the way she used to hum over boiling gumbo. The lantern flared brighter. The hallway opened at last into a cavernous chamber, half flooded with dark water, still and cold as glass. A single shaft of pale, sourceless light fell across the room, and there, in the middle, stood Marcus Baddow. He was waist deep in the water, facing away, his hands slack at his sides. His eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting that strange light.
Marcus,
Renard said softly, stepping to the edge of the flooded floor. No response. The widow's voice floated through the chamber, warm and velvet and dangerous.
If you wish to lead him out, you must see as I see, walk as I walk.
The veil rose from his hand, though he didn't remember lifting it. It hovered before him, rippling like it was underwater. Renard muttered,
I am absolutely going to regret this.
And slipped the veil over his head. Instantly, the world shifted. The water glowed faintly from within. The tombs pulsed with a pale light, and 1,000 unseen faces watched from the walls. He took a step forward, and the water was ice on his skin. Marcus turned his head slowly toward him, eyes flickering with a distant recognition. Renard extended a hand.
Come on, buddy. Let's go home before she charges us interest.
The bargain and the escape. The water in the chamber barely rippled around Renard's knees, yet he felt as if he were wading through memory itself. Thick, heavy, and cold. Marcus leaned against him limply, breath coming in shallow, slow pulls. He wasn't unconscious, but he wasn't entirely awake either. The widow materialized in the watery reflection first, her shape rising from the surface like it had always been there. Her veil drifted in an unseen current, and the smell of jasmine swelled, sweet and almost unbearable. You found him, she said, her voice the soft scrape of leaves over stone.
Now comes the price.
Renard grimaced.
I already gave you a memory.
A small gift,
She agreed.
but not the price of passage. He is a trespasser, and you are a thief. One walked into my house uninvited. The other carried my key. That is not free.
Renard adjusted his grip on Marcus, who sagged heavier against him.
So what? You want my soul? I don't recommend it. It's patchy in places.
The widow glided closer, the water unbroken beneath his feet.
No, not your soul. I want your promise. A debt to be collected in time. A favor to be named. A door you will not refuse to open.
Renard hesitated. Deals like this were dangerous. They had teeth. But so did drowning in a crypt that didn't exist, carrying a gravedigger who would otherwise rot between realities.
Fine.
he said at last.
One favor, one door. But I want him safe, and I want to walk out of here breathing.
The widow leaned close enough that the edges of her veil brushed his cheek. Her voice slipped inside his ear, silk and wrought all at once.
July 17th.
Renard shivered.
What about it?
You'll know.
Then she was gone, dissolving into the faint light, leaving only the smell of jasmine and the sudden appearance of a narrow arched door on the far wall. Its stone frame wept condensation, and beyond it he could see the faint glow of the night sky.
All right.
Renard muttered.
Let's get out of this fish tank before she changes her mind.
They stumbled through the archway, Marcus leaning like dead weight against him. The moment Renard's boots hit dry marble, the veil slipped from his face and the heavy air lifted. They emerged into St. Louis Cemetery, No. 1. The real one this time, or at least he hoped so. The night sky had cleared to a dull, cloud-sagged moon. The world felt fragile, like a soap bubble ready to pop. Renard half dragged, half carried Marcus through the gates. When he turned back, the crypt was gone. In its place was only a wall of old tombs, unbroken and perfectly ordinary. The veil was in his hand again, but it had changed. Its edges smoldered faintly, little threads of ghostly smoke curling up into the night, and the scent of jasmine clung to him like guilt. Back at the Krewe of the Morningstar, Renard laid Marcus across the long table in the back room. Their gravedigger stirred, coughed, and mumbled something about too deep, too long, before slipping into exhausted sleep. Renard hung the veil on a hook in the darkest corner of the shop, away from the other cursed objects. He didn't want it looking at him. He didn't want it to whisper. He told himself he'd forget about it, the same way he'd forgotten other bad ideas that had followed him home. He poured himself a drink, sat in the dark, and tried very hard not to think about the date the widow had whispered in his ear. That night he dreamed of jasmine. It crept under the door, curled up the walls, and filled his lungs until he could taste sweetness on the back of his tongue. And through it all, the widow's voice coiled around his thoughts like smoke.
One day soon, thief, I'll come collect.
Renard woke before dawn, sweating, the smell of jasmine still clinging to his pillow. The city's quiet again, the lanterns gone cold, but somewhere in the dark, a woman in black still waits. Veil traveling in the dust, counting down to July 17th. Renard doesn't dream much anymore. When he does, the jasmine's always blooming, and someone's always whispering that his time is almost up. You've been listening to Tongue of the Serpent, written and created by Loveday Funk. Wilson Revell is the voice of Lucy and Devereaux, and Jared Savoy is the voice of Renard Blackwood. If the story lingered in your thoughts, share it, so the widow knows her message reached you.